So joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He's national co-chair of President Biden's re-election campaign. And I want to build on President Biden's point. Not only were they trying to change the truth about January 6th, but you have now Trump's followers. I don't even know what to call them, like backbenchers in Congress, but they're in Congress, like Elise Stefanik, using the word January 6th hostages for those who were tried and convicted for taking part in an insurrection and busting down the doors and windows of our Capitol and running around in there, beating up cops and trying to kill people and looking for Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. You know the story. They're in jail now. But she, too, now using Trump's words, calling them hostages, which is especially sick right now, given world events.
President Biden gave a forceful speech in Valley Forge in Pennsylvania for the anniversary of January 6th and followed it up with the speech we just heard clips from at Mother Emanuel AME. And he is using former President Trump's own words to draw that sharp contrast where he makes it clear President Trump is trying to rewrite history, trying to redescribe what happened on January 6th, and that others in Congress are moving with him to call those properly convicted of beating and attacking policemen, of smashing their way into the Capitol, of riot and insurrection, calling them hostages, suggests that they are innocent and being held against their will and improperly. That's just one small way of showing how sharp and clear the divide is between those who want to restore President Trump to the presidency and those of us who want to make sure that democracy continues in this country with the re-election of Joe Biden.
So can you talk about how different this election is than others? This is not Democrat versus Republican. This is something different. What is it?
Part of why President Biden talks about MAGA Republicans as opposed to just Republicans is to draw that distinction, is to make it clear that the Republicans that I've worked with and he's worked with for many years, folks who respect the rule of law, who think that those who smash their way into the Capitol should be tried, are really distinct from those who think that, frankly, up is down, down is up, and that political violence is acceptable, and the only thing that matters is the restoration of Trump. I'm concerned about what we see on the ground in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and the tone and tenor, both of the debate here in Congress and of what's happening on the campaign trail. One thing just to encourage you, Gene, there were dozens of us, state and local elected officials from all over the country who joined President Biden in that speech in Pennsylvania, a governor, lieutenant governor, mayors, county commissioners, and we had a great convening and rally beforehand and then went forth from there to do exactly the kind of local work that Michelle Obama is also making a critical difference in now.
So let's talk for a minute then about Pennsylvania, obviously a swing state, a key state. Do you share the concern that Congressman Jim Clyburn from my state of South Carolina expressed on Sunday that the Biden message is not breaking through, that it's not breaking through all the noise in the way that it should now, just from what you see in Pennsylvania or your home state of Delaware?
Yes, I mean, look, demonstrably, poll after poll shows that the broadly great economic news and the significant accomplishments of the first few years of the Biden administration hasn't really broken through. And I think Congressman Clyburn was talking about specifically Black Americans, but younger Americans, working class Americans aren't quite feeling it. But I'll say this, I'd rather be in our place where the polls are soft, but the underlying economics are really strong and getting stronger than in the reverse, where the president is enjoying a bump in the polls, but wow, are the underlying economics heading in a bad direction. We have record numbers of new manufacturing jobs, of economic growth, of low unemployment, of wage growth, and we're beginning to see the actual fruits of the bipartisan work in Congress in new job construction, new roads. The price of insulin is now capped at $35 a month, particularly poignant for Congressman Clyburn, his late wife having died of diabetes, and he himself was saying, I know how much insulin used to cost. We're going to see more and more things like this where average Americans are feeling it and seeing it.
So, Katty, I would think Michelle Obama could also be incredibly helpful on tying the very crucial issue of abortion health care to Donald Trump, who, by the way, put the people in place who overturned Roe.
Yeah, and there has been some reporting that some people around the president's team have said maybe if Joe Biden went out and kind of used that word more, talked about abortion more,
I think so.
Frankly, that would also be helpful as well. And we've seen actually Kamala Harris take this up. It is useful to have these high-profile female surrogates raising this issue. But just listening to you, Senator, and what you're saying, is there a sort of feeling in the campaign that actually things will move your way, that actually in a sense you have to be in a kind of waiting
Nobody's
pattern?
counting on
the
that.
Message exactly, and is that a risky strategy? That, I mean, yeah, you may be right that the economic indicators suggest that by next spring, summer, we'll be in a much stronger position and people will be feeling those material improvements in their daily lives. Is that the kind of big hope?
Hope is not a strategy.
Right.
Strategy is to get out there and get working and get engaged. And so, look, our president has 50 years of seasoning and experience in handling complex world issues, and the world's on fire. And his time is demanded by engaging with Israel, Gaza, engaging with the fight in Ukraine against Russian aggression, and many other things I could mention. I'm glad that he's now really turning to focus on the campaign, that we're broadening the number and reach of the campaign co-chairs and the campaign leadership. In my hometown of Wilmington, the number of folks hired now and in their seats and working hard to support a nationwide network on the campaign is growing rapidly. They've had great fundraising, and I think we're now going to see a fully engaged campaign effort. All
right, I have two other questions for you about current events. We still don't have a lot of answers as to why Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was sort of off the grid and nobody knew about it, some sort of hospital procedure. And there are those who are calling for his resignation. Should Lloyd Austin step down?
I have confidence in Secretary Austin. The administration has announced there will be a thorough review of what happened here, how it happened, that simultaneously you had three critical people, the Secretary of Defense, his Chief of Staff, the Deputy Secretary, not coordinating, not communicating to the White House. I'll wait for the result of that review of what happened. Secretary Austin has said he takes full responsibility. But this is a critical issue that needs to be clarified and brought forward.
Right. Is there... are you thinking there might be something that explains that? I mean, it still happened.
I don't know. I don't know yet, and that's why I think having that review then will bring forward how did this happen? What was the process?
One more question about that. He is in the chain of command. He is in the military chain of command.
What would be the reason?
He's also in the line of succession to the presidency.
Exactly.
He's in both.
So was that chain of command, was the integrity of that chain of command maintained throughout this illness, or do we know?
I don't know. There are people who know, but I think Congress and the American people need to know.